the Desert Tiger Podcast.
Hello.
Hello, Nikki. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. Having a beautiful day, so I cannot complain at all.
Awesome. You're in Kamloops, is that right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, awesome. It's so nice to chat to someone that's in the same time zone.
Yeah, it's a little difficult over here on this coast because a lot of the music industry is in Toronto, is in
Always plus minus 3 hours.
what time zone am I in? Oh, Manitoba today. Okay, how many hours is that? Dang it.
Yeah, counting gets hard.
So you almost have to be like a hotel where you have different clocks on the wall at all
Multiple
different
clocks.
times.
Actually, that's really not the worst idea. Maybe not on the wall, but maybe on my desktop.
Exactly, maybe. It's somewhere convenient. I guess you don't need to own a bunch of ticking clocks all the time. That might get a little annoying.
Yeah, distracting probably, knowing myself.
You aren't clicking on rhythm. God, what band is this?
Why aren't you in time?
The problems of being a musician.
Yeah.
And we're here to talk a little bit about your music and your journey here today. Are you ready to jump on into things?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, awesome. So we're going to be talking about some of your newer singles here today, but of course I'd love to lay a little bit of a foundation down for the listener so they can get a little bit of an idea of what has led us to these tracks. And your debut EP dropped in 2018, and you had one single in 2019 with Maybe I'm Loving Wrong. And then in 2020, of course, the entire music industry was forced to adapt, and you yourself, I'd say, did a fairly good job of this with, you didn't release any singles, but you stayed incredibly busy during this time.
Yeah, I was really fortunate. I think there's something about artists, and I don't think it's exclusive to musicians. I think artists throughout history have proven this in all disciplines, that there's something about our nature that adapts and goes into sort of that fight or flight mode. It's okay, what do we do? How do we make this work? How are we going to pay rent this month and keep our head above water, even though the entire industry sort of changed? And I think especially in music, we saw that a lot, in the turn of the millennium, where we were shifting to digital and, consumption changed, then streaming and all that kind of stuff. So as much as I don't want to take away from, the impact and the devastation of the last 18 months, I think it has been a really interesting time for artists to figure out what next and how do we adapt and innovate and make it work. And I've been fortunate to be able to do that and to keep my head above water, and also have the opportunity to connect with people from all around the world and open up different sorts of avenues and doors that I certainly didn't have open previously. So very grateful for that.
So not only spent this time with those live streams, over 175 just in 2020, over 300
yeah.
over this period of time. You've also used this time to network and sort of build that collection of contacts so that you can continue to tackle the music industry wherever and however the future allows you to then.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I always say this, and it probably doesn't make sense when you put it into perspective of 300 virtual shows or whatever. But prior to the pandemic, I was that person who's I could never ever just perform for a camera. And I'm the kind of person that I don't think I'd ever made an Instagram story of my face prior to, I was just always no. I like to do live performance, and I like to be in the studio, and I like to do all these things. And now I'm it's a beautiful, comfortable thing for me when I get to go online and sort of share in that community of that streaming space. So yeah, anyone can do it, I promise.
Can be imposing at first to start for sure, but once you get comfortable with it, and that difference in exchange, because like you say, you're used to the live show where
yeah, energy is different.
it's immediate feedback in where you can hear them, where like the live stream,
Yeah, it's not silence right after you're done.
it's feedback, but like you have to be able to like somehow like watch the screen and be like, oh, okay, what did these people say? Okay, I have to like keep in conversation with this and then like do my own thing too. It's a different way of interacting with the crowd.
It's totally different, but it's interesting because it's been a little bit more natural than I probably ever anticipated. And I think that it's kind of one of the perks of growing up in like technology and the development of that technology. You know, we're kind of used to messaging and interpreting what people say in the digital world, in our real world. And, you know, like all those things you don't think about while they're happening. But yeah, I think it probably prepared me more than what I ever realized. You can't beat an actual live audience and the reactions and the sound of that. I don't think that will ever get old, and I don't think I'll ever take that for granted ever again. But I think it's also a really beautiful thing to be able to give people a safe space to create community and connect through music, no matter where they are in the world and what they're going through.
Absolutely. It's, as you mentioned earlier, artists continue to find a way to create and express, and art continues to inspire, to help people through difficult times, no matter what they may be through history. You've seen it time and time again, and art's importance throughout time, and it's continued to do so. So it's sort of beautiful. I like how you put that, the perspective of that.
I will argue to the day that I die how important the arts are and how valuable they are. And I think especially now when consumption is an all-time high, but perhaps its value or its perceived value from a financial perspective is at an all-time low. I think it's really important that we remember how important it is and share that amongst the world.
I definitely agree. And of course, now that we've discussed sort of how you stayed connected with the audience and otherwise, I'd like to know, like, during this time while you're playing all of these live shows, are you continue to write, continue to build new tracks over this time so that once you became like ready to release new music, let's say with the first track you released in this year with The Last Night, there, Dancing With You, which released in March. When exactly did that track start to come together? What was the magic, the formula behind it?
The formula behind that one was a global pandemic that shut the industry down. It's funny because I think that like 2020, like I think it'll go down in history probably as one of the biggest years for writers and music creators because there was a lot to pull from, even beyond the pandemic, just the world, even now, it's crazy out there. But so I actually had the great privilege of being in Nashville in early March for a songwriting camp. And I was in this beautiful, like, Zen place in the woods in Jolton, just outside of Nashville itself. And working with all of these incredible artists and just being inspired. And I was like really trying not to like touch my phone as much as possible and just be present and, you know, get as much as I could out of it. And so it turns out a lot changed within, you know, the first couple of weeks of the month. And I got to wrap the camp, which was awesome. And my friends were actually going to fly down from Toronto and meet me, and we were going to do the tourist thing. And I'd never been to Nashville before, so was super pumped to watch like all of the live music and eat all of the Southern food. It was like, I was so excited. And I finished up this camp and I was getting ready to, you know, grab an Uber back to downtown. And my friend called to say, hey, like, we're not coming. Flights are being canceled. And also like, you might want to come home. And so I got to the hotel and turned on the news, and suddenly it was like national emergencies been declared in the U.S. and Trudeau was encouraging all Canadians to come back because, you know, at that point we didn't know what was going to happen with the border and no one really knew what was going on. And when I left it just wasn't, it was a very isolated concern at that point. In those early days, it was, you know, even at the airport, it was like a concern over whether you'd travel to China and Iran. Like it was sort of like we were at that point. And so in that short time that I'd been in the woods and completely disconnected from the internet, it had developed to this like really concerning issue. And so fortunately, I was able to change my flight to come back early, which that whole trip was probably one of the most like, I can only describe it as like a film, like in a movie, like an apocalypse, like that kind of feeling, like traveling in those like early days of shutdowns and panic is a very, very bizarre thing. But I got home and sort of I was still kind of like trying to recalibrate from like my beautiful like cloud nine experience to reality. And it would just felt like one phone call after another. I was getting like gig cancellations and show cancellations and just anything that had been planned or booked just nonstop. It just like the phone would ring and I'd be like, okay, like who is it this time? And it was super depressing and disheartening as it was for everybody. And I found myself writing a lot about how I was feeling, which I think is, probably the case for every artist. And I just got to a point where I was really down and just going down like that hole of like, this is really, really hard. And I don't know what the industry's going to look like. I don't know what my life's going to look like. And I got to this point where I was like, you know what, I gotta get myself out of this. Like I have to make myself feel better right now because this is a slippery slope. And so I was like, okay, if I'm going to write a song, why don't I think about it from a different perspective? So instead of writing about how I feel, how about I think about where I want to be instead of where I'm at, or how I want to feel instead of how I'm feeling right now. So kind of like, all right, so if the world is ending, like if this is it, if this is the last night of the world, then how would I want to spend it? And for me, that is probably just dancing my face off in my living room with everybody I love. So I decided to write a song about that. And I thought about the kinds of music that make me feel good, even when I'm grumpy or frustrated or having a tough day. And I tried to pull in that sort of influence. And that's kind of where the song came from. It's like, if it's the last night, I want to spend it dancing with you.
Oh, it's a very moving thought there, because it's just it is sort of, if the world's ending, why take that time and spend it panicking when you could be enjoying the moment with people you love, right?
Yeah, and I think that's probably like true, or like a good life lesson, is to think about it that way. Like life is short and those moments are precious, and it's really easy to get caught up in the overwhelming nature of things sometimes. But if we pare it back and say, like time is limited, let's just make the most of it and make sure that we're present.
Mhm. Very, very true. Very, very true. You have to enjoy the moment. Can't always continue to live in fear forever, and you can't live in the past either, because as much of a wonderful place as it is, reminiscing is great, but it's only great every so often, because if you live in the past, you miss out on the present. If you live in the future in fear of that, you miss out on the present. And as the wiseness of one Kung Fu Panda movie says, the present is a gift. So
Yes, that's why they call it the present.
exactly. Exactly. And then, of course, from there, we move forward to our next present here, which came to us at the beginning of August with your latest single, Fall Back to You. Of course, this was sort of, you mentioned going to a writing camp before everything shut down, and this was sort of another writing camp situation. So, sort of, how did this come together? What was the story behind Fall Back into You, this new track?
So I felt like, so toward the end of last year, there was sort of like mumblings in the music community that there was going to be a Ryan Tedder masterclass and all this kind of stuff. I shouldn't say masterclass, monthly course. Masterclass is a different thing altogether. But I was sort of humming and hawing about it because I really, really value education and development and all that kind of thing. But then I was also a little bit intimidated because I was like, oh, I don't think my production skills are as like good as they might need to be for this, or like maybe I'm not good enough at all or whatever. But I was also in this kind of rut of writing in a pandemic for almost a year, and feeling like maybe I needed a little bit of a push to get out of that and to break some of those limitations I was putting on myself. So I actually signed up with a friend of mine, and I was kind of like, if all else, this is an opportunity to watch like somebody at that level and that caliber create 3 songs from start to finish and encourage me to do the same. So, really it's about what I bring in and take out. It's got nothing to do with whether I think I'm good enough or not. And so the whole premise of the monthly course is, 30 days. And for this one, 3 songs, start to finish, 30 days alongside watching Ryan Tedder. And it was so valuable for me because it almost gave me a little bit more confidence and encouraged me that I have something to say, and maybe I might know what I'm doing just a little bit, and that I should trust that and trust my instincts. So this song was actually the first song I wrote out of this class, and he suggested we write in a slightly different way than I'm used to writing. Let's put it that way. It is a little bit different of a process that I'm used to. And the thing with a class like that is like the deadlines are super, super close together and tight, and then, like there's no time. So what's really, really cool about that is when someone puts a challenge to you to do something out of the box of what you're used to, and there's a quick turnaround time in terms of deadlines, you don't have the time to second guess yourself. You don't have the time to like sit there and question whether it's good or be a perfectionist or like all of those sorts of things, which I probably spend way too much time doing for the most part in normal life. So I was sort of just delivering what I had done and what I came up with, and going with a lot of my first choices and first instincts, which is sort of that's what he wanted, was like us to trust our ears, our gut, all that kind of stuff. And the original song, he wanted us to start with a vibe. So that's something that's not really how I write usually. But it's interesting because I wrote these 4 chords in the chorus, and then sort of like did my own little demo production, like brought up the soundscaping and created an atmosphere. And then I always say that music has such like a physical reaction, I hope for everybody, but for me, like it's something that like can literally feel like a gut punch or a warm hug, or like I always have this physical response alongside an emotional one. And it's funny because a loop of 4 chords like got me there, and then it just came out. It was quick, and from demo through to what's released now, I don't believe there was a change in melody or lyrics at all. Even though in my head while I was doing it, I was like, oh, it's okay. I'll turn it in and then I'll go back later and fix it all up if I don't like it. But it turns out I maybe should trust my gut a little bit more and trust my own ears and instinct and roll with it, see what happens, instead of getting inside my own head and censoring myself before I'm even at that point.
Mm-hmm. No, it's an incredible lesson there, as you say, because as creatives, as artists, and even just as human beings, we are our own toughest critics. And sometimes, I'll use a word I used earlier, magic. Sometimes you can overthink it, and by overthinking it, the process, the song itself can maybe lose a little bit of that luster, the magic that it had once it was its true emotions, because you overthink it, you try and put too much into it, and then it's not what it becomes. But then sometimes it's just is you have to trust yourself and you have to put it out into the world, because how do you grow from that moment? If you don't, you just sort of get stuck, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. I love the perspective. So when you say that like you captured the vibe and otherwise, like, so what were some of when you only have so long and you're trying to like do your own production and otherwise, what were some of the tricks and some of the things that you were adding to this song to sort of try and like bring out this emotion? Like, of course, you said the 4 chords get you there, but there's a little bit more to it there's some layered vocals, there's some other, like, it's a lot more deeper than just that.
Yeah, so that's kind of the beauty of also being able to take something from a demo to a full production, like commercial release. And I'm so grateful and lucky to work with Shane Stevenson here in Vancouver, who's an amazing producer who somehow just takes the craziness in my head and interprets it and gives me what I want. So shout out to him. Yeah, so that's sort of the beauty, is to be able to take something. For me, I hear a lot of things and I see a lot of things, feel a lot of things. And sometimes I don't necessarily have the tools or the skills, at least from a production point of view, to really communicate it. So I can kind of get it, hint at it. But I worked with Shane to really like sort of take that to the next level and tell that story. And that's also comes from a place of like, I've grown up writing songs at my piano or on the guitar, or, I come from a very acoustic background and sort of been trying to be a little bit more playful and explore more with the whole sort of set of like sonic elements and sound. So this song in particular really wanted to focus on some like little soundscaping things with like texture. And then, building up the chorus of voices, which basically me over and over and over and over again, because who can afford a choir in a pandemic, or ever actually as an indie artist? But yeah, like bringing in all of these sorts of elements and like trying to not set limits or boundaries on what we perceive is acceptable for pop music. And I think like I always joke that it's like kind of one of those weird things where like I'm as equally influenced by Trent Reznor as I am by Janet Jackson. Like it's like there's something to be taken from everything, and the idea of layering or having these visual images and turning those like images in your mind into like this sonic representation is something that's just so interesting to me. And this was the first song that I really felt like we could just do it and trust that maybe it would work and maybe people would like it. And like, I don't know, if not, then I'm really proud of it. But I think it's kind of a cool thing. And I think what allowed me to really explore that is the fact that it didn't come from a personal experience or specific circumstance. Which I think, to be honest, most of my songs, or when I write, that is the case. I just pour out my feelings and, hope that people don't think I'm oversharing. That's sort of like the basis of a lot of my work. But with this one, because it came from a feeling, it's not that I don't identify with that. It's not that I haven't gone through it 10 times over, but because it was based around this feeling and this like idea that I know what that's like, as opposed to like this specific moment in my life that just happened that I want to talk about, I think it allowed me to be a little bit more playful and daring and trying to bring that to life in like a subtle way that also is still accessible and hooky and relevant and quote unquote pop.
Of course,
I
because
feel like I just nerded out a little bit there. I'm so sorry.
no worries at all. I mean, as musicians, we love to nerd out, and I mean, absolutely. Let's go. Well, it's a lot of learning and otherwise, right? And a lot of growth, as you say, and as you mentioned, it's if it finds success, great. If it doesn't, you learned from it, you grew from it, but it has found some traction. It has found some success, being probably your fastest track to reach that 10K mark. So sort of validating the experience there, the moment, the emotion, everything that has gone into this.
Yeah, and it's tough because, like I know especially for me, I've spent a long time trying to figure out what I think people want to hear or what I think people expect of me or, like that kind of stuff. And I feel like this year, I'm almost glad that I was a little bit delayed in releasing new music because this year I feel like I've put out two singles that I love, that I created out of a place of loving music. And I sort of did it without any real regard for what I thought people might want from me. And the reception has been better than I could have expected. And I think it's because of that, because I didn't try to fit myself into a box that probably was never meant for me to begin with. And I think that music well, I think that music is the best thing in the world. But I think people relate when it comes from a very real place and there are no boundaries and there are no limitations. Nothing says that you only have to do a certain kind of music or that pop music can't have cross genre influences. And, I think I maybe the last 18 months has just taken away some of those inhibitions or fears around what other people think. And it's pushing me, not to say that I'm there all the way yet, because I definitely have. I'm definitely still fighting some, insecurity battles. But I think I am looking for less validation now than I was and trusting that, if I speak my truth and tell my stories and um, share music that I'm genuinely proud of and that makes me feel good, then hopefully people can take what they need from that and it'll make them feel good too.
Hmm. Absolutely. At least it'll find those who value it. And the value of pop music is so much more than some people give it credit for because, it's so easy to write. It's so like, no, it's like,
Yeah, I feel like that's a common misconception.
yeah, if it was, trust me, everybody would be doing it.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so this is like the timing of this is wild because I started watching an interview with Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross and Halsey, and I didn't get to finish it yet. I only got about a half an hour in when I was having my coffee earlier. But she referenced that. She said, like, people think that writing pop music is easy. And she said, but no, it's so scientific. Like, it's almost harder because you can't necessarily do what you want. Like there is a formula. It is scientific and it's really hard.
You want to get played on the radio? Great. Your song has to be like 3 minutes, 4 minutes long. 4 minutes max, three and a half.
That's the
Like,
thing. It's like it's hard to come up with something that people like the masses might enjoy and do it in a way that also like has some artistic integrity.
exactly. To capture the essence, the energy, the emotion that you're trying to put into that timeline. It's difficult because you not only do you have to do it, but you have to do it in a way that is hooky, that is catchy, that is going to be
Melodic, yeah.
danceable, listenable, like you say, that it's going to hit you physically, not just emotionally. And even
And you have one chance usually. It's not that people often won't repeat listen or avoid hitting that skip button if it doesn't hook them quick enough. And I think that is it's across the board, but I think it is overly specific, especially to pop or mainstream music. People don't give it a chance, so you got to get them quick and you have to make that impression really quickly, and that's tough. But I also I grew up listening to all kinds of music, but the music that really makes me like feel good, whether that's like feel good by like dancing around my living room or like feel good like I'm having a tough day and I just want to cry and I want to listen to all the sad songs that I love. Like for me, that is a good melody and a good hook, and for the most part, primarily mainstream music.
Mhm. Absolutely, for sure. All right. So we talked about challenging yourself in different ways, adapting and otherwise. So how do we move forward from Fall Back Into You? What does the future hold? What does 2021 hold for Niki Kennedy? Of course, without giving away too much of the magic, the secrets.
Well, I do have a new single in the works. Um, it's in the final stages now, and I will say this: greatly inspired by Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation album. And it was also a song that I wrote in this monthly course. I would say I got my money's worth out of that class because I walked away with two songs that I'm genuinely excited to share. But I am going to be continuing live streaming and virtual shows regardless of the fact that live shows are now coming back. I have this awesome platform that I stream on called Volume, and it's just been the coolest thing to connect with people. Specifically, a lot of my audience is in the United States, but it's really neat because I would not have had that opportunity to reach them otherwise. I would have been, playing in BC probably 99% of the time. So I'm going to be moving forward with a virtual and a live hybrid, which I'm super excited about, and I'm super excited about exploring what that looks like. But the virtual side is definitely more focused on creating that community and giving people a safe space to come and hang out and feel welcome and to listen to tunes and to make some friends from all over the world and really like not being alone during what has been a really hard time. Very excited to be back to live as well, though, I have to say. Amazing. So grateful. But yeah, and I'm super stoked to be one of the participants of the SoCAM Foundation TD Incubator for Creative Entrepreneurship this year. So there's 25 Canadian music creators that were selected, and we have had all of this incredible access to industry people for knowledge and education. And we will be paired with a mentor to get some one-on-one mentorship. So I'm really, really excited about that. It's tough to make connections and to learn from people that are really in it and doing it and have seen success. So I feel incredibly privileged to have that opportunity coming up, and I intend to make the most of it.
Well, you mentioned your value of education earlier, so I don't doubt exactly that. You're going to make the most of this, take that information, carry it forward, and move into the future as bright as possible. I've had a fantastic time talking here today, Niki.
Oh my goodness, me too. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for just being awesome.
No worries, no worries. I have one question left for you, though. Are you ready for it?
I think so.
Awesome. Okay. No worries. We've talked about your evolution as an artist, growing, taking that value of education, adapting, all of these wonderful things. What I would like to know is, over this process of 2 years here now, how has this time helped you grow as a person, or what has it taught you about yourself?
Oh, that is such a good question. Oh gosh, I think it's taught me a lot. The biggest thing, and I feel like I've been saying this a lot lately, and I feel like I'm going to keep saying it for a long time because I don't know who's going to listen to this and need to hear it, but the fact that you are enough has been something that I've been really trying to embrace over the last couple of years. And I say you because if you're watching this, you are enough. But I think that's the biggest thing for me has been learning that I I am enough as a human being. I don't need to be anything else. I don't need to try and become something that I'm not, because who I am as a person, how I walk into a room and how I show up is enough. And not everyone's going to like that, and that's okay. But I think it's a big lesson that I've learned, and I can't say that I'm 100% there and truly, committing to that, but it's a work in progress, and I'm trying really hard to trust that, especially in the way that I assert myself with musical development and creative decisions and all of that thing too, is not apologizing for the space that I take up as a human. And the thing that I have not yet adopted, but I really liked and understand, just have yet to implement, is that rest is productivity. We're working on that one because I'm a workaholic, but
I know how that goes, but it's something that they don't tell you because it gets put into you where, oh, you gotta continue to grind. You gotta continue to grind. That's the way exactly. But it's just you don't operate properly if you're not getting enough sleep. It's the same as like working out. If you're not getting rest, your body's not going to rebuild properly, and therefore all of your hard work. Exactly. It just doesn't happen. And once again, also value the lesson that you shared with us of, once again, you are enough, because we are our hardest doubters, our biggest like people that look at ourselves. We doubt ourselves. We give ourselves the highest criticisms, our hardest critics. That's what I'm looking for. And
got there, yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is like, we're all actually unique. Like, we don't need to find things that are special about us, because we are special. We are unique. We're like, no one looks or sounds the way that we do, unless, maybe you have a twin or something, but
maybe. But either way,
I don't. So
it's a hard process to rewrite, though, because we've spent our entire lives, no matter how long they are, with this mindset. And it's not just a switch that you got to flick off. It's like you said, you take it one day at a time. You learn this process of
very big wave that gets,
Exactly. Well, and I appreciate you sharing this lesson. I appreciate you sharing this journey, the stories behind these new singles, and everything that we have discussed here today, Niki, here on the Desert Tiger Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and please take care, and I'll keep in touch for sure.